I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm excited to be talking about Agatha All Along with the wonderful Sasheer Zamata. And starting off, I wanted to talk about some of the research that you were doing for your stand-up special, Then First Woman, at the time that you got the audition for this, because I love that it had you diving into a lot of research and you were already reading a lot of books around witchcraft and the idea of covens when this came to you. And I was curious how that helped you to really start developing this character and kind of some of the ideas that it gave you early on in terms of who she might be as an individual and in the context of this coven in the show.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I've had a fascination with witches for a while. I think the idea that a person can be so powerful on their own that people want to have them ousted from the community is powerful. And in my stand-up special, I wanted to talk about a lot of women from history, and that includes witches. And it was really fun to do and put together. And then completely separately, months later, after I had already filmed my special, I got asked to audition for this show. And it was really kismet. It just it did I because they didn't see me do that material. They had no idea that I already had an inclination towards witches and witchcraft and witch lore. But yeah, I just felt very appropriate. And then when I auditioned for the show and got it, I was so excited. And the producer has saw me later perform some of that witch material live, and they were like, "Oh, we didn't even realize how perfect this was. Like how what a perfect match this was." And yeah, and it's so cool to be working in a production where other people are nerdy about witch history because they were also doing a ton of research on witches, and we were swapping stories and swapping resources and links and stuff like that. And also like to read about the history of midwifery and like how midwives got labeled as witches, or they were doing demonic things, or they were, things that were not like practically medical, in order to give doctors more of a like forefront in the medical service. It was really fascinating, and I just get really excited about talking to other people who love doing the same kind of research, and so it felt like a very appropriate place to be.
And to that point at the end as well, I think there's something so interesting about playing a character who was really using their power in service of others and her history in the medical field. And there was a book in particular that I heard you were reading called Witches, Midwife, and Nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And how did kind of like looking into the medical field and the association of witchcraft in that field give you a lot of the backstory that you were developing as well?
Well, I think when thinking about Jen and all these witches, really, ultimately at our baseline, we've all been kind of pushed out of our societies for different reasons. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for Jen. Not only is she a witch, but she lost her power. So now she's not even a part of the witch community anymore. And on top of that, the thing that she loved, which was like helping people and healing people, I think that kind of gotten taken away from her too. And so she's really feeling like distrustful and alone and very solitary. So her journey through this show is kind of learning how to trust people again and how to use other people as resources and as a team. And that's something she's been like out of practice with for good reason, because she has been burned in so many different ways. And yeah, it's an interesting character to play because I feel like our arc that we're going to see her go through in the show is quite incredible.
That's so interesting what you were describing as well, because I think in terms of the story that she's running when we first meet her in the show kind of feels like it's an attempt at a pathway back. And, we learn that there's this class action lawsuit against her with all these people with injuries. But to you, was it really a case of she is trying to do things that are effective and will work for people, but it's just the fact that she's had to try and teach herself this incredibly new skill set and a different way of doing things because she was so used to relying on her powers for so long?
It could be that. I think she also may have gotten disillusioned with helping people. She's, I think, gotten a little cynical with all of her practices, her witch practices, her self-care practices. And so, I think who knows when in her timeline this happened, but I do feel like there was a bit of a shift where it's kind of like, who cares? Like who cares? I don't, I'm here to service myself. I'm trying to get money. I'm trying to like survive. And if people get hurt along the way, not my problem. which is sad. It's sad to like find a person in this place when you know they used to be someone who enjoyed helping people. So I think the hope is that Jen can get back to a place where she actually enjoys doing that.
I also love that kind of some of that cynicism leads to really great comedy and humor in her as a character, because she has this kind of very sarcastic bite to a lot of things that she says, which are so brilliant. And so how did you set about finding what you felt her comedic voice was going to be as a character, like in that way?
Well, thankfully, the writers are really good. So they wrote a lot of really great jokes for my character. And I also am a sarcastic person in my own life. So it didn't come very hard at all. But yeah, it was really fun to find this version of Jen who is like so begrudgingly going on this journey and kind of like putting up with everybody. Like throughout the series, we see more and more ways where she's like, self-serving, but I think it's also fun to see her kind of battle herself with that, where she's like, well, I actually do need these people. So how do I like use them and also like work with them, but also like they're not my friends. I'm not trying to get like close to any of them. It's like a very confusing litany of things happening inside of her.
And you were mentioning that the writers obviously have given you so many great one-liners throughout the show. And obviously one of the most prominent ones that people are glomming onto is the "you sound pitchy" to Patti LuPone.
Oh
And I
my
just
God.
wanted to ask about having to deliver the line "you sound pitchy" to Patti LuPone herself in that scene.
I mean, it was quite scary to tell Patti LuPone, you sound bitchy. But, you know, Patty's an actor and knows what we're doing and didn't take it personally at all because she, I think, feels very confident about her singing. But yeah, you know, working with Patty in particular, she's such a joy and so funny and brings such a light to the environment. And there are many scenes where I had to work with her and I was like, is she gonna be okay with this? You know, in episode 3, I literally had to push her. Like I had to actually push her to get her out of my way to run and escape the water. And I remember when we were doing that, I asked like, how hard are you okay with me pushing you? And she's like, honey, push me. Like I don't care, push me. And I was like, okay. And we did it a couple of times where I would like pretend to push her or like push, like tap her and like make it seem like I really pushed her. And she's like, no, push me. And I was like, here we go. And so I really pushed her and then she flew into Joe's arms and that's what we have on camera. But yeah, she's just so down for anything. So it's fun to play with.
I also love what you were describing earlier in terms of your character and the way that she's really kind of going on this entire journey begrudgingly, and that's obviously half the humor that just naturally exists with this whole coven as a group. But we're already kind of starting to see those walls come down a little bit in certain moments, because those moments where they allow themselves to be a little bit more open and a little bit more honest are when they succeed along the witch's road. And so how have you said about finding the moments where her guard is really up for valid reasons, but those little kind of cracks that you want to start creating in it?
Yeah, I think the group dynamic helps that. The more this group gets to know each other, the more my walls are coming down and I'm like allowing these people to see the sides that I've been hiding for so long. And I think it's really beautiful because the show is like about magic and witches and like so many things, action adventure, but it's also about sisterhood and unity and teamwork. And I think the more we see these women come together and attempt that, the more we feel for these characters.
I also think there's a lot to be said for her relationship with Agatha, because at the beginning, she's very clear about, I made it a point to never have to see you again. And, but then Agatha kind of becomes the one to be like, you need to believe in yourself because there's a reason that I left you alone. And it's because you knew what you were doing and what you were doing was worthwhile. And so how have you wanted to kind of take this relationship of animosity that they have with each other, but again, also just find those little ways to start flipping it on its head?
Yeah, I think it's cool that Agatha and Jen have had such a long history with each other because it's like we know each other. Like, but also Jen knows what other people have said. Like, I also do give into the gossip of like she's evil, she like will betray anyone, including her son. And so I'm wary of this person. But I do think we respect each other, and I hope that's clear because we're both powerful witches in our own rights. And I think, we don't want to get along. We don't want to have to work together, but we do in this situation. So it makes for a very funny, like, repartee throughout the show.
And I think also to the point that you just mentioned about how long that history is, your character as a whole has a history much longer than any human life of a character you would have played before. And so, how did that create a different space in being able to really think more deeply about the rich history of this character, if it did at all?
I think it kind of influenced how I viewed her cynicism because she has lived for so long. She's seen history change in so many ways and seen her role in her communities and in her history change in so many ways. So, yeah, I think if I, Sasheer, was someone who lived for hundreds of years, I think I would also probably be jaded at some points and be like, well, this is the same old shit. We're just like in a loop doing this and this and this. And like, oh, these people are the ones that we hate for some reason. And these people are now the people we hate for some reason. So yeah, I could see her being someone who's just kind of like over it, which is kind of why I think she kind of doesn't care about like helping people anymore, because who's been helping her?
But even on the opposite side of that, like we start to see the protectiveness that she has when she kind of goes up to Teen with Joe Locke's character, and she's like, "Hey, just a warning, Agatha, from what I hear, did this to her son, and so you need to just be very wary and be very careful." And so, did you find that even though there is that element, that there's still that original side of her that exists underneath, and it just takes the right circumstance to bring it out of her?
I think that's right. Yeah, I think it takes the right circumstances or the right person. And, Teen is so young. So I think, there's a little part of Jen that's like, oh, well, he doesn't deserve to be tricked by Agatha. Like the rest of these crones, I don't care. But this little boy, like, I can't sit here and just watch him be used like this. So yeah, I think there's a part of her that is still willing to protect and care for people, but it just depends on who.
Yeah. And I mean in that same episode I wanted to talk about when they drink the poison wine and Jennifer has that hallucination of the man who was responsible for binding her and removing her ability to have powers, because it feels like that's a moment where she gets to face a trauma that's existed for such a long time within her. And did you feel like that created a shift or a change in her, in the fact that she went through that experience, and even though she hasn't fully overcome it, that she was able to confront it in the moment?
I think so. I think with like a lot of trauma, it's like probably preferred by our bodies and minds to stuff it down and not address it and kind of lock it away for a while. And I think that's what Jen did. I think she didn't really want to admit that someone could take her power or just, she want to be reminded of this. And she really literally had to face this obstacle in that trial. And I think it did open her up a bit. And, she shared that story around the campfire with the other women about like how she thinks her power got taken. And yeah, I think facing your trauma, however little it is, does help you open up a bit to hopefully moving through it and addressing it, and maybe hopefully getting to a place of acceptance and moving past it. But yeah, I think it's necessary for Jen to be able to face what's been happening to her and not ignore it anymore.
And it must be a huge root of the reason that she doesn't trust people for so many reasons, because to your point, when she tells that story of how it happened, it's that she was being asked to come and give her expertise and kind of give her voice. And then her voice, in some way, sense of the form, was literally taken away from her.
Mm-hmm.
But did you feel like she had maybe been someone who had moments where she wouldn't trust people before? Or did you feel like that was the real genesis of where it all came from for her?
I do think that was the genesis. Yeah, like she was happy to share her knowledge. She was happy to help like teach other people how to help people, and she had the ultimate betrayal. And so I think that really locks you up after something like that happens. Where you're like, wait, my knowledge is the reason why you like trapped me, that you took this thing away from me. And so of course she's gonna like stuff it down and act like she doesn't know anything, because that's what got her in trouble in the first place. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways that was the starting point for her distrust of other people.
I actually also wanted to ask you something in regards to her costumes because, we kind of see yes, we have the different costumes that come in with each of the different places that they go into and the way they adapt into their surroundings. But that main costume that you're wearing in terms of that light pink, I've heard you say that you really thought of it as a very masculine color in terms of the history of the fact that pink used to be a very masculine color and represent a lot of strength. And so what did that channel into the character for you in terms of thinking of it in that specific way?
I liked thinking of it as like her armor. When we meet her in the house when the team is assembling, she's wearing this like kind of coat cape thing. And, I feel like the pink, I think it's a way to kind of disarm other people, but arm her. And I also love that we see me so bright and so pink in the beginning of this show. And as we keep going on the road, you're really going to see this dress evolve because a lot of stuff is happening and we all have to literally get our hands dirty. And I think the dress kind of represents the evolution that Jen is going through too. Like, the dress is changing, she is changing internally and externally. And yeah, I think it's a cool representation of what she's going through.
And then it also kind of just gives this real presentation of like very clean, clear, crisp lines that kind of matches with the way that she's just trying to be, a little bit more closed in on herself. And so, how did that create a lot of the movement of the character for you once you looked at that visual intention for her?
Oh, it was like so cool to be able to use the costume for this character. That cape coat thingy that I was wearing. Like I kind of had to hold my hands in a certain way and like a little like dinosaur kind of. But it makes for like a more posh type of stance. And I'm always wearing heels or boots, and that kind of affects the way I walk. So I do feel like the costume really helps add to the layers that are Jen.
And in talking a little bit about the music in the show as well, and just kind of the renditions that we've already seen of the ballad, which are so great. I know that they didn't ask any of you, if you knew how to sing or had experience, but for you that you had an experience in kind of like singing in church and singing in show choirs growing up. And so how did you kind of look back to that experience from when you were younger and just, step into this space where you're then kind of figuring out the harmonies because it's not just about singing as you, it's about singing and performing as that character and how they intertwine with the group.
Yeah, I love singing in choirs. Like the harmonies that we all get to create as an ensemble feels so nice. And like, we're literally trying to create harmony like with this group. And I do think my background in singing in church choir and show choirs and musicals like does help for the situation because no one is like, trying to step out and like be the star of that moment. We're all trying to create a group and have like one goal by singing the song together. And it's so nice. And it really does feel like magical when we do it together. Like when we were singing, when we were filming it, when we sang the song on stage at D23, like our voices together really does feel like we're like summoning something and it feels so special. And I'm just so glad people are liking it.
I love that. And in terms of the sets as well, I love how much of this show is done practically with in-camera effects and also I imagine as an actor that that must create a really wonderful experience because you're getting to interact, you're getting to kind of physically walk down the road and kind of go through all these spaces. Has it made it quite a physically involved role though as a result of that as well?
I mean, yeah, they built a whole forest for us, which was so cool, and it really does enhance our acting because we get to actually feel like we're in that environment. But then, we have to be barefoot for a lot of the show, and so we really are like walking on leaves, walking on rocks, walking on dirt. And I was like, and I love doing grounding exercises. It is good to have your feet touch the earth, but it after a while, it is like I've touched a lot of earth. I've touched a lot of earth with my feet, and it's still happening.
It also sounds from the way that I often hear you talk about this show that, it's such a great space in terms of really culminating all of the experience that you have in the comedy world, but also allowing you to lean even more into the space of drama, because yes, there's so much great comedy in this show, but it's also really intimate and vulnerable for all of these characters at the same time. And so how do you feel that that allowed you to kind of stretch your muscles in new and different ways as an actor?
It was such a wonderful opportunity. I come from a comedy background, so I'm used to doing comedic stuff and it feels very comfortable for me. But it was so nice to not only be asked to do comedy, which is in my wheelhouse, but also be asked to do more dramatic things and kind of stretch my muscle and go outside my comfort zone. And yeah, I got to be, I was asked to do things on the show that I've never been asked to do before. And I'm so glad and I'm excited people are enjoying it. And I hope to do more and more of it because, I have the ability to do it. I'm just not often asked to do that because people think of me as a comedian, but I'm so fortunate that the creators of the show could see me as a performer who could do it.
I also imagine that, the experience of working on Saturday Night Live when you did as well, yes, it's in a comedic space, but that also must be something that just really prepares you for the idea of throwing yourself into anything and just, even if I haven't done this before, I know that I have the tools to figure it out. And so how did even just going back to the idea of that as a boot camp help you when you were stepping into this as well?
Well, it's funny. I think I can't remember who I was talking to, but we kind of figured out that every performer on Agatha has had live performance experience, like done Broadway or theater or something. So, uh, and I don't, I think maybe because the show does so many different things, we're in so many different worlds, we have so many different looks and so many different tones are happening in this show. I think having a live performance background does help you to adapt quickly to a new type of performing. And it's fun. It's so fun to be able to work with people who are like down and kind of not really like rattled easily. And I think because, people who do perform live, because things can happen out of nowhere or something happens in, at the moment on stage and you have to adjust in the moment, it makes you ready for anything. So I do think all that background did help me throughout my career, especially for this show.
It's also this really wonderful space of just getting to play in this completely fantastical world. And did that idea and that sense of play that you get in this fantasy world also just really connect you back to a lot of what originally got you excited as a performer and the art of play to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love being able to like truly play different characters and have different sides of me be shown and we are absolutely doing that in the show. Everyone is like doing the most and yeah, like we're basically filming like horror movies at one point and then at some points it's like a romantic comedy and at some points it's straight comedy and at some points it's like a drama. It's just like all over the place and I love doing it and yeah, it's like a performer's dream really to be able to actually play.
I love that because it's so wonderful to watch the show as an audience member, and your performance has been fantastic. I can't wait to watch the rest of the episodes. Thank you so much for talking about it.
Yes, thank you.